You know that song, the one where the moment those first three notes hit, you're instantly back in 1982, riding in the passenger seat of a car that doesn't exist anymore, next to a person you may or may not still talk to. And you know the story that goes with it too. One perfect song, one moment in the sun, and then nothing, gone, vanished, a ghost in the machine of pop music history. Except here's the thing, for at least half of the artists you're about to hear, that story is a lie, not an exaggeration, not a simplification, a flat-out verifiable chart-documented lie. These are 10 acts that soft rock radio, VH1 specials, and lazy internet listicles have spent 40 years branding as one-hit wonders, and every single one of them actually charted again. Sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times. One of these guys won 4 Grammys in a single night and still gets called a one-hit wonder to this day. Here's how this myth actually gets built, because it's not an accident, and it's not laziness either, at least not entirely. It's math. Radio only has so many hours in a day. Greatest hits compilations only have so many tracks. And when a song is big enough, loud enough, ever-present enough, it doesn't just become an artist's biggest hit. It becomes a kind of black hole. It pulls in all the light around it. Every other song that artist ever released gets sucked into its gravity and disappears from the collective memory, even if that song was also, technically, a hit in its own right. That's what you're about to watch happen, 10 separate times, in 10 separate ways. So here's the game. As each one comes up, ask yourself honestly, did I know this? Because by the time we get to number 1, I promise you, the answer is going to surprise you. Stick around, because the artist at the very top of this list didn't just have a second hit. He had one of the greatest debut years any musician has ever had, statistically, historically, unrepeated to this day, and somehow, the myth still stuck to him anyway. We're also going to be tracking something else as we go. Watch how the size of the myth grows the further down this list you get. The first few entries are simple oversights, a song people forgot existed. But by the time we hit the top 3, we're not talking about forgotten songs anymore. We're talking about entire other careers, entire other chart histories, sometimes on entire other continents, all buried underneath one unforgettable chorus. Let's start peeling back the myth, one entry at a time. Number 10, Franke and the Knockouts. If you were near a radio in the summer of 1981, you knew Sweetheart. That soaring, foreigner-adjacent chorus climbed all the way to number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100 and stayed on the chart for 19 weeks straight. It was inescapable. It was on every station, every countdown show, every mixtape a teenager in 1981 was willing to admit to owning. It was also, according to popular memory, the only thing this New Jersey band ever did. Look closer, and the story falls apart almost immediately. Just 2 months after Sweetheart peaked, the band was back on the chart with You're My Girl, which cracked the top 30 that same year. And the year after that, Without You, Not Another Lonely Night, climbed into the 20s as well. That's 3 separate charting singles, from 3 separate release windows, from a band most casual listeners can only name one song from. Here's a fun bit of trivia to file away for later. Franke, the band's frontman, would go on to co-write 2 of the most iconic songs of an entirely different decade for an entirely different medium, songs so massive they'd eventually eclipse even Sweetheart itself in the cultural memory. But that's a story for another video. For now, just sit with this number. 3 hits, 1 reputation. That's the exact pattern you're going to see over and over again tonight. And it only gets more dramatic from here. Number 9. Bertie Higgins.
Wrapped around each other.
Key Largo is one of those songs that feels like it was beamed in from an actual tropical vacation. Warm, breezy, a little cheesy in the best way. Built on the kind of soft, Bogart and Bacall romanticism that only the early 80s could pull off with a straight face. It climbed to number 8 on the Hot 100 in the spring of 1982. It also hit number 1 on the Adult Contemporary chart, which tells you exactly who this song was built for, and exactly which listeners were still humming it decades later at wedding receptions and beach bars up and down the coast. Here's what almost nobody remembers, and it's honestly one of the more surprising catches on this entire list. The very same album that gave the world Key Largo also produced a second charting single, Just Another Day in Paradise, which reached the Adult Contemporary Top 10 in its own right, and even cracked the Hot 100 on top of that. And Higgins wasn't done there either. 2 years later, in 1984, When You Fall in Love gave him a third trip up that same Adult Contemporary chart. That's not a one-hit wonder. That's not even a two-hit wonder. That's a man with 3 separate charting singles, all rooted in that same tropical, sun-drenched sound, and yet every single retrospective, every nostalgia playlist, every whatever happened to article, reduces his entire career down to one postcard from Key Largo. Bertie Higgins didn't just wash up on the beach once. He kept coming back with the tide, and almost nobody noticed. Number 8. Ambrosia. Now this one's a little sneaky, because Ambrosia's story actually starts back in the mid-1970s, with hits like Holdin' On to Yesterday and How Much I Feel, both of which cracked the top 20 in their own era. But it's their 1980 single Biggest Part of Me that most casual listeners remember, and remember as their only song, full stop. It's soft rock royalty, built on a groove so smooth and so hypnotic, it's been sampled and interpolated by hip-hop producers for decades since. On stage, the band's own drummer once said he and his teacher wrote 6 or 7 songs chasing that exact same feel before landing on the one that actually worked. It spent 3 weeks parked at number 3 on the Hot 100 and became a gold-certified single. But the same album, 180, produced a second single just months later. You're the Only Woman, You and I, climbed to number 13 that same year, spent time at number 5 on the Adult Contemporary chart, and went gold in its own right. You're gonna stay together. 2 top 20 hits, from the same record, released in the same 12-month stretch. And if anything, calling Ambrosia a one-hit wonder isn't just wrong, it's wrong twice over. Because by the time Biggest Part of Me ever hit the charts, this band already had 2 other top 40 hits under their belt from years earlier. This isn't an act that got lucky once. This is a band that got lucky, by any honest definition, at least 5 separate times, and still can't shake the one-song reputation. Number 7. Robbie Dupree. Steal Away might be the single most yacht rock song that has ever yacht rocked. Smooth, warm, unmistakably 1980, built on that unmistakable Michael McDonald-adjacent groove that defined an entire subgenre of soft rock radio. It sailed all the way to number 6 on the Hot 100 that summer and landed at number 5 on the Adult Contemporary chart. It was so big, so inescapable, that VH1 actually put it on their official list of the 100 greatest one-hit wonders of the 80s. Here's the twist, and it's a genuinely satisfying one. VH1 got it wrong, and they got it wrong on their own list, using their own network's own chart research. Because just a few months after Steal Away peaked, Dupree released Hot Rod Hearts, and it climbed all the way to number 15 on that very same Hot 100, spending 18 weeks on the chart in the process. That's not a fluke. That's not some forgotten B-side that only got played on late-night regional radio. That's a second top 20 hit, cruising along right behind the first one, charting so close to Steal Away that the two songs practically overlapped on the airwaves that same year. And it still gets erased from the story, every single time, even by the very outlets whose entire job is supposedly to get this history right. We're halfway there, and honestly, we've barely scratched the surface. Everything up to this point has been about a forgotten second single, a follow-up nobody remembers. Starting right now, the stakes get bigger. From here on out, we're not just talking about one missing song anymore. We're talking about entire chapters of these artists' careers that got completely wiped from the record. Keep that in mind, because number 1 on this list. Number 6. T'Pau. Here in the States, T'Pau is a footnote. Heart and Soul hit number 4 on the Hot 100 in 1987. A big, dramatic, synth-drenched power ballad with a chorus built to fill an arena. And then, as far as American radio was concerned, that was that. One song, one moment, gone. But flip the story across the Atlantic, and everything changes completely. In the United Kingdom, T'Pau wasn't a one-hit wonder. They were a genuine, bona fide hit machine. Their song, China in Your Hand, spent 5 weeks at number 1 on the UK singles chart. An absolute chart-topping monster in their home country. They racked up multiple additional top 40 hits on top of that, stretching well into the early 90s, with a fan base and a chart presence that would put plenty of so-called superstars to shame. American listeners only ever got a glimpse of one narrow corner of a much bigger career that, everywhere else in the world, was the real deal, sustained, successful, and ongoing. Sometimes the myth of the one-hit wonder isn't even about missing chart data on the same chart. It's about which country's charts you happen to be watching, and how much bigger the real story gets the moment you look somewhere else. Number 5. John Parr. St. Elmo's Fire, Man in Motion, is one of those songs that's bigger than the movie it was written for. It hit number 1 on the Hot 100 in the fall of 1985, an absolute monster of a soundtrack single, all pounding drums, soaring synths, and fist-pumping determination. It's the kind of song that still gets played to hype up a crowd before a big game, decades after the movie itself faded from cultural relevance. But John Parr wasn't some soundtrack one-off who got lucky with a single movie tie-in. A full year earlier, in 1984, his single Naughty Naughty had already cracked the Hot 100's top 25 on its own merits. No film studio, no marketing tie-in, just a song that connected with radio audiences the old-fashioned way. He was a working artist with a genuine, independent chart track record before Hollywood ever came calling, looking for a theme song. The movie song is just the one that stuck permanently in the culture's memory, immortalized by repetition in trailers and highlight reels for 40 years, and in doing so, it quietly swallowed the rest of his story whole. Number 4. Kim Carnes. Bette Davis Eyes doesn't just belong on this list. It might be the single most famous one-hit wonder myth in all of American pop music. That smoky, synth-laced voice, half whisper, half growl, topped the Hot 100 for 9 straight weeks in 1981, and became the biggest single of that entire year, one of the defining sounds of the whole decade's opening chapter. Ask 100 people to name a Kim Carnes song, and 99 of them stop right there. Except Kim Carnes was already a certified hitmaker before Bette Davis Eyes ever existed. In 1980, a full year before her signature smash, she'd teamed up with Kenny Rogers for the duet Don't Fall in Love with a Dreamer, which climbed all the way to number 4 on the Hot 100. And in that very same whirlwind year as Bette Davis' Eyes, her own follow-up single, Draw of the Cards, gave her yet another chart entry under her own name. She wasn't a lightning-in-a-bottle discovery, some unknown singer plucked from obscurity for one perfect single. She was an established, working artist who happened to have the biggest song of her career land so hard, with so much cultural force, that it erased the memory of everything else she'd already built, before and around it. Only 3 left. And I want to be honest with you. These last 3 aren't just bigger misconceptions than the ones before them. They're a completely different category of myth. Everything up to now has been about a second single people forgot. What's coming next involves entire other hit songs, entire other award ceremonies, and in one case, an entire other decade of chart-topping fame that somehow still gets ignored. Number 3. Rupert Holmes. You know this one before I even say the title. Escape, the Piña Colada song, spent 3 weeks at number 1, straddling the turn of the decade into 1980, and it has been inescapable at karaoke nights, wedding receptions, and grocery store speakers ever since. It's the platonic ideal of a novelty smash, catchy enough to become permanently embedded in the culture, but so catchy that it completely overshadows anything else the artist behind it ever does again. Except Rupert Holmes didn't disappear after that Piña Colada faded from the glass. Just months later, in that same calendar year, his follow-up single, Him, climbed all the way to number 6 on the Hot 100. A genuine, credible, top 10 pop hit. Smooth and moody, and completely different in tone from the song that made him famous, arriving right on the heels of the biggest novelty song of the entire era. Most people who can sing every single word of Piña Colada, start to finish, without missing a beat, couldn't hum 2 bars of Him if their life depended on it. And that gap, between a song everyone can sing and a song nobody remembers exists, is exactly the kind of gap this whole list has been built to expose. Number 2. America. Here's where the story gets a little different, and honestly, a little more interesting than anything we've covered so far. Most people who think of America as a one-hit wonder aren't even thinking about the 1980s at all. They're thinking of a horse with no name, that hypnotic, droning, unmistakably early 70s chart topper from 1972, and assuming that whatever came after it must have been nothing. But in 1982, a full decade after they were supposedly done and dusted, America roared back onto the charts with You Can Do Magic, which climbed all the way to number 8 on the Hot 100. To an entire generation of younger listeners who only ever caught that comeback single on the radio, with no context for what came before it, it felt like a total one-off. A random band that appeared out of nowhere with one catchy song and then vanished right back into obscurity. In reality, they were a band with a string of number 1 hits and platinum albums already behind them, a full decade into a genuinely major career, simply proving all over again that they still had it. The myth here isn't even that they only had one hit. It's that an entire generation of listeners only ever heard the second act of a much longer, much bigger story, and mistook a comeback for a debut. And now, number 1. The artist that this entire list has secretly been building toward from the very first sentence. Christopher Cross. If you only know one thing about Christopher Cross, it's almost certainly sailing, the gentle, drifting #1 hit from 1980 that still shows up on soft rock playlists, spa soundtracks, and lazy Sunday morning radio to this very day. It's smooth, it's serene, it practically floats out of the speakers, and to a huge number of casual listeners, it's the only song they could name if you put them on the spot and asked them to prove they knew who Christopher Cross even was. Here's what should genuinely stop you in your tracks, because this isn't just a case of one forgotten follow-up single. This is on a completely different scale from everything else on this list. In that very same debut year, 1980, Christopher Cross also had Ride Like the Wind climb all the way to #2 on the Hot 100, kept out of the top spot only by another massive hit of the era, two enormous singles from the same debut album in the same 12 months. Then came the awards. His self-titled debut record swept the Grammys that year, winning Album of the Year, Record of the Year, Song of the Year, and Best New Artist, all four, in a single night. No artist in the history of the Grammy Awards had ever pulled off that exact sweep before. Think about that for a second. Before he'd even released a second album, Christopher Cross had already achieved something no musician, not the Beatles, not Michael Jackson, not anyone, had ever managed to do in one ceremony. And he still wasn't finished. The following year, Arthur's theme, Best That You Can Do, written for the film Arthur, starring Dudley Moore, climbed all the way back to #1 on the Hot 100. It went on to win him an Academy Award for Best Original Song, making him one of the vanishingly small number of musicians who can claim both a Grammy sweep and an Oscar on their resume. And even after all of that, his 1983 single, All Right, gave him yet another top 40 hit, on top of everything else. Sit with the full scope of that for a moment. In the span of roughly 18 months, this one artist had two top 2 hits, a second chart-topping #1, 4 Grammy Awards in a single night, and an Academy Award. That is, by almost any measure you want to use, one of the single greatest opening stretches any solo artist has ever had in the history of American popular music. And somehow, 40-plus years later, casual conversation still boils the entire achievement down to the sailing guy, as if that gentle little yacht rock tune were the whole story, instead of just the opening note of one of the most decorated debuts music has ever seen. That's the real lesson of this entire list, and it's worth sitting with before we go. The songs that hit hardest in the moment are often the exact songs that erase everything else an artist ever did. One massive wave of a hit rolls in, and the rest of the catalog, no matter how impressive, no matter how many awards or chart positions or gold records it earned, just quietly sinks beneath it in our collective memory. It isn't fair, and it isn't accurate, but it's how nostalgia works. The biggest wave is the only one anybody remembers riding. So be honest with yourself for a second. How many of these 10 did you actually know had a second hit, a hidden chapter, or an entire other career before you watched this video? Was it one of them? 3? Be honest. Was it none of them at all? Because if you made it all the way to Christopher Cross without knowing about the Grammy sweep or the Oscar, you are absolutely not alone. And that's exactly the myth this whole channel exists to correct. Drop your number in the comments below. I want to know exactly how many of these 10 surprised you, and which one hit the hardest. And if this kind of deep dive into the songs and stories soft rock radio left behind is your kind of thing, you know exactly what to do next. Subscribe, ring the bell, and stick around, because there are a whole lot more forgotten stories where this one came from.